Want to talk today about mind and time management, which is not something at all that I'm an expert on, um, but have gained some good experience largely from the time when I started working from home. When I started working from home, sorry, let me back up. I'm working from home now, for sure, but in the summers, I also work from home doing a private practice. And when I first started that private practice, I was very used to getting in to work at 7:30 and staying until 5:30 or 6 every day. And so just simply the possibility of doing that amount of work while being at home was amazing to me. Like that was enough to just like get me to be extremely productive. Um, Over time, though, bad habits start creeping in, as you well know, and the good habits sort of like you maybe lose some of them, you forget some of them. Um, and so I started having to like really be more diligent with how I scheduled my time and um, scheduled out my day. And it got harder and harder and harder and harder until the point where I wasn't getting done what I wanted to get done. So um, had a number of sort of revelations during that time as I was trying to um, increase my productivity. But one of them that maybe is just my opinion, but it's an opinion that I still hold to, is that um, a a schedule is just like follows the exact same rules as a budget and even a diet. And so I had done some of those things. I had never really like tried to budget my time in the same way that I've tried to budget my money or my calories. And so a lot of the lessons that I learned from trying to budget my calories or my money translated directly over to trying to budget my time. And when you do a really good budget for yourself, a money budget, um, the thing that you learn is that it actually feels really good to spend your money where you want to spend your money. It's not about just like shutting down your expenses and like being miserable. It's about saying where your priorities are and how you want to like express those priorities through money. Um, when you're trying to like lose a few pounds, it's the same thing. When you actually like write out what you're going to eat that day and how many calories are in each thing and how many calories you want to um, intake for the day and where those calories come from, protein, fat, all that you're really doing is saying like, I want it to taste really good and I want it to be satisfying. And so um, I'm going to make a plan and I'm going to, attack the day using that plan. Um, what doesn't work for either a budget or a diet is to go way, way, way overboard and to set some really unrealistic expectations for yourself. Um, because what will happen is that you'll sort of like do that and then you'll slingshot the other way. And that's just human behavior. It's like a given that that's going to happen. Um, so why do we have such a hard time spending our time the way we want, spending our money the way we want, or spending our calories the way we want? It's because of what psychologists call the pleasure trap, which let's see, who is this guy? There's a great lecture by a guy named Douglas Lisle, Lisle. It was a TEDx out of Fremont, and he has done psychological research on this idea of the pleasure trap. Basically, please watch that if you're interested. But basically, it's saying when you take a bite of like a Big Mac or anything with the super calorie rich food, um, your brain just goes in a billion synapses firing at one time. It's just spectacular. It's hitting your taste buds in a way that's just like way over the top. It's driving everything up to 11. And so then when you go to like eat a carrot, for instance, or like an avocado, those your taste buds are like, this is not good. This is like eating cardboard. It's not. I'm not tasting anything. The same sort of thing can certainly happen with a budget in terms of like when you set some new expectations for how you're going to spend your money. It can be really difficult to say like, but I really want to go out and blow all that money at the bar or at this restaurant or shopping. Like I miss it. It's like rich in a way that I'm not used to not having. When it comes to time and how we spend our time, the sort of the version of paring down to me comes in the form of meditation. And meditation doesn't have to be like this sort of like Zen, all is right with the world sort of idea. It can just be a very simple moment in your day that you pause and think about what's ahead of you. And in my opinion, most importantly, think about what you have to do, but what it's going to feel like to be done with those things. And that's where we have a really hard time as human beings. That's where we have a really hard time, like getting pushed around by our email or seeing a YouTube video and just being like, yeah, let's do that. It's the reason why like YouTube or like Instagram TV or TikTok or whatever it is at this moment is so addictive, because it's just like, this is here in front of me right now. And your ideas about what you were going to do with the day and like all of your other objectives and like your big plans for your life and how you're going to do this like little thing to like push towards those big plans in your life. Those are so hard to think about in those moments because it's just the input is coming at you. And so when we think about this phrase that we've talked about, you can suffer the pains of discipline or the pains of regret. The idea behind that quote is simply to say the pains of discipline are tiny in comparison to the pains of regret. But the reason why we have such a hard time self-motivating, getting going on the things that we actually want to be working on, is because frankly it's a lack of imagination. It's a lack of imagination of like how we're going to get there, and a lack of imagination of how good it'll feel to have accomplished that thing. The other part of this that like really translates over from like the calories or the dollars sort of analogy is that it's that you need to be really kind to yourself. So you need to set really realistic expectations. You're not going to like take on a diet that's like cayenne pepper water with lemon. Like that's a bad idea. It's just a bad idea. You're not going to set a budget that's like, I'm just not going to spend any money this month. It's a bad idea. So setting realistic expectations. And then if you don't meet those expectations, to just be kind, to not like beat yourself up and say, oh, I screwed up. I ate this hamburger, right? I totally screwed up my whole diet. I'm worthless. None of that works. And that's like well established in both of those fields. It's the same thing when you're managing your own time. If you don't meet your deadline the way you thought you were going to meet your deadline, it's okay. Move on. Accountability and shame don't have anything to do with each other. They're certainly not the same thing. And so, as a further extension of this metaphor, if I went to an accountant and I said, "Well, yeah, I did buy a new flat screen TV. That wasn't in my budget." My accountant's not going to be like, "Get out now." They're going to be like, "Oh, okay. Well, that wasn't the best idea, but let's just move on. Let's just go from here." In the same way, like when I was a kid, I would go to my mom's Weight Watcher meetings, and they would ask her about like what she had eaten and all this stuff. If she had a bad week, they weren't ever like, "Well, you've really screwed up. What are we supposed to do here?" They just said, "Oh, that's okay. Let's think about the week to come." So be realistic and be kind to yourself. There's no value whatsoever in shame. The sort of third part of that is that whenever possible, and most of the time it is possible, stick to it. And so what that means is when you set a schedule for yourself, it will be wrong. It won't be perfect. Allow yourself like an hour later on in the day to pick up some of that stuff that didn't work, that you didn't have enough time for. But schedule it so that if you gave yourself an hour to do this task and you only got halfway through the task, do not allow yourself to spend another hour on that. This is something that I talk about a lot, and it's hard to explain exactly why this is. I think we'll get to a little bit of that in terms of reward systems here in a second. But stick to it. And then the next day, reset your schedule so it's more realistic. Again, it's the same thing with a budget, with a diet. If you don't meet your budget, just be kind to yourself. Say, "Oh, okay, that didn't work," but don't then go spend a bunch more money if you can avoid it. Instead, feel the hurt of that, and then the next day, or in the case of a budget, next month, recalibrate to make it more realistic. Moving on to the next sort of part of this, one of the things that I found that a lot of people will tell you about is just simply this idea of distraction. I don't equate like distraction to a lack of productivity necessarily, because sometimes distraction can be really valuable. Going for a walk, staring out the window, those can all be really valuable things. What I'm talking about largely, in my instance, is being whipped around by email. My body and mind will just automatically go check my email. It's just sitting there. It's a tab. It's open, like 80 other tabs. And when I click on it, it takes me in all these directions that I don't need to go on. So if I say to myself, "I'm going to be doing this for the next hour," I will start in on it for about 10 minutes, and then my brain will be like, "Let's just check the email real quick." And it completely disrupts everything. And so the more you can get rid of that type of distraction, the better. So what I had to do was, in most cases, most tasks, I just turn off my Wi-Fi, which sounds really stupid. You can just always turn it right back on, but it's just enough of a barrier for me to remind myself like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I'm working right now." And then when I'm in that heavy work mode, my brain also is just like, "Oh, you need to add this to your shopping list," or, "Oh, it would be cool if you like checked out these on Amazon. In that instance, just write that stuff down. You do not have time in your work session to go off on 1,000 tangents. So just write it down. In the back of all my sketchbooks, there's just lists of like random stuff. Write it down and then use that as a reward. So at the end of your hour session, that's what you're going to do. And you're training your brain to say, like, we're going to get through this, and then you're going to have a little playtime. And that idea of reward is so important. It's telling me my internet connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. We're almost through this. The other thing that I would have you take a look at is something like Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro technique is just like work for 20 minutes and then play for 5 minutes. And it turns out that 20 minutes of real work is actually a really long time. You can get a lot of stuff done in 20 minutes. It also holds you to that 5 minutes of playtime. And so for me, and I go back and forth. Sometimes I'll do an hour and then I'll do 15 minutes of play. Other times I'll do 20 minutes of work, 5 minutes of play. It just depends on how I'm feeling that day. But those little 5 minutes are your reward. Sometimes if I need to send out 20 emails, I will put 20 M&Ms to the side of my desk. And I know I've talked to you guys about this. And then I'm really hungry. I really want to eat those, or maybe they're almonds or whatever they are. And I'll write an email and I'll have one of them. And in a way, I'm training myself the same way I would train like a puppy, which sounds crazy, but our brains are wired very similarly. And you can effectively hack your motivation system by just rewarding yourself. So whatever that is for you, if it's like a stretch break or, getting up and walking around or whatever that is, like give yourself some real rewards. As we've talked about, satisfaction in your work is a three-legged stool, and it doesn't work without all three legs. And the first one is planning, the second one is execution, and the third one is reflection. The planning and execution part, I think we're familiar with. Like my brother says, plan your work, work your plan. That's planning and execution. But we don't enough reflect on how that went and just simply, wow, we did it. I succeeded in the thing I planned to do. But this gets back to this idea of what I call camp tasking, which is about setting concise, achievable goals for yourself, executing them, and then reflecting or providing a reward there. So as an example, when you're camping, you'll like set up your tent, or rather you'll get there, you'll sort of look at the plot of bare land, you'll say, I need to set up the tent. You set up the tent, and then you look at the tent like, wow, there's a little house here where there didn't used to be a house. Or you'll say, somebody needs to go gather some sticks for the fire, and you go do that, and then you bring them back, and you're like, yeah, I did that. And somebody needs to start this fire. You just do that, and then you crack open a beer and look at the value of the thing you've created. If you can bring that sort of like 3-part mindset into your daily tasks, even as simple as like getting some emails out, because for me, some of that stuff causes dread. I just go like, oh, I really don't want to do that. It sucks. So if I can have a little moment of meditation to set my objective and make my plan, I can then do the damn thing. And then I can look back and say, okay, I was dreading that. it was going to be really hard and brutal. And now I'm on the other side of it. It feels really good. So next part of this is, the last part really is know when your brain is most sparky. For me, that's like between the hours of like 8:30 and 11:30 a.m. historically. During that time, your brain will want to jump into doing work because you're like, listen, this is the only time that I'm going to be ready to do work. That's what your brain's going to tell you. It's just like, I'm ready now. Why don't we get some stuff done? And so you're going to grab for the closest thing. And typically that's like the lowest hanging fruit. Or it's going to be that thing, like we've talked about, the knitting task. And the knitting task is like the thing you can do while holding a conversation. Both of those are big mistakes. So when your brain is sparky, the best thing for you to do is make a list of all the things that you need to do and start to schedule it out for yourself. That's what that time is used for. Make the list. It doesn't have to have any sort of organization to it. Then categorize the list. And that may be clumping them up, breaking them out. Then prioritize that list. Like this, I need to get done first. For some of you that you may use, like I think it's Ben Franklin or Thomas Jefferson had the urgent, not urgent, important, not important, sort of like matrix. You can make that sort of quadrant, and then you'll sort of start categorizing. This is not urgent and it's not important. And then up here is like, this is urgent, this is important. And you can start to sort of break out your day like that. Keep a real eye out for knitting tasks. Those themselves are a reward. Well, I shouldn't say that. Those can be a reward when you are way too busy. So in the case of like your final thesis semester, things like knitting tasks, which might be in your case, doing something in Photoshop where you just have to like do this repeated action over and over and over again. Or like, it might be, you know exactly what you want to do and you're just going to sort of do it mindlessly. Those are things that you should save for the very end of the day because your mind won't be there. And so to do something mindlessly, schedule it for the time when your mind's not going to be there. And because it's going to be this thing that you're going to look forward to and like finally be able to like breathe and finish up your day with this like more gentle task. So there's lots of different, lots of other strategies that you can approach your list with. You could, I strongly recommend tackling the scariest items first. And scariest doesn't necessarily mean the longest or even the most difficult. It's just like the ones that you feel like have a mental block. Get those done within the first hour of your day. And the rest of your day is going to feel completely different for that reason. There's some value in saying, okay, on my list, there's 4 items right here that are going to take me 5 minutes each. If you want to just hit those after you do your scariest task, that's a good way of doing it as well. I would hold the things that I'm actually excited to do until the early afternoon of my day. And then, like I said, save knitting for a reward. We've talked about IPO. In our instance, IPO stands for intent, procedure, outcome. I have found it's a really valuable way to just sort of flesh out what exactly I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And a lot of times I have an outcome in mind, but I don't have any idea what I want to do in terms of like how I'm going to do it, the procedure, or why I even care to do that. Other times I have an intent. I know why I want to do something, but I don't know what I want it to look like. and I don't know the procedure that I'm going to execute. So when you're looking through those, feel free to mix them up. Why, how, and what. What would happen if you just started with the how and had no idea why you were doing it or what you were going to be creating, but you just knew that you wanted to create this in this way, the how. So yeah, that's basically all that I have for you guys. The other sort of like footnotes of this are, you should listen to Michael Pollan's short book on caffeine, which is only available via audiobook for some reason. It is incredible, and it's just like totally revelatory. And it will help you recognize that caffeine is like 90% of Americans drink caffeine or imbibe caffeine in some way. It is an incredibly powerful drug. And most of the time, the way that we use it in America is to just come get back up to baseline. So when you drink your coffee in the morning and you feel a lot better, that's how you used to feel all the time. And so it's not an advertisement for like cutting caffeine out altogether. It's simply to say it's a powerful drug and you can use it to your advantage. So if you're feeling stuck, that's the best time to grab some caffeine. If you're like at 2 p.m., which is a natural slump in the day, and you really need to get some work done and you don't have time to like take a 10-minute nap, that's the time for caffeine. When you are drinking caffeine at like 7 in the morning, you're telling the natural processes in your brain that like we don't need the way that you would naturally wake me up. I've got this other drug. And so that's probably the most dangerous time to drink some caffeine. Anyway, I'll let you guys figure that out on your own. And then the last thing that we've also talked about is this idea of restorative time. And restorative time looks different for every person. When I was in grad school, I thought restorative time looked like watching a movie. And I was positive about that. I was like, I knew what restorative time was, and I was totally wrong. And as it turns out, for me, restorative time for me is like, can I be in a hammock? And again, 10 minutes is all I need. Can I lay on the ground looking up at a tree, into a canopy of a tree? 10 minutes. Can I go be by a body of water? 10 minutes of that and I'm back. And then if I don't have any of those opportunities, like say in the middle of winter, for me it's stretching can help me, or like just sitting on the floor and just like meditating, which in my case is just a matter of like listening to my breath and just like focusing entirely on my breath entirely. So I'd love for you to think about what that is for you. A lot of you might think like, well, video games restores me. But like, if it takes 8 hours, if it's something that like you want to like stay up all night doing, that's not a restorative activity. So why don't we open up the conversation? I know we've talked about this a little bit before, but has anybody had any like more recent revelations on ways that they've been able to like restore their mindset?
I mean, just recently in this, and I think I maybe have touched on this before, but I just like have a room dedicated to each task so that I feel like I'm changing my environment. So like my dining room is where I do school, my living room is where I do work, and then like upstairs is where I really take a break and kind of try to avoid technology. So like my main floor is like my work floor, my upstairs is like, okay, I can relax and
I love it. Yeah. For me, I've really missed being out on the front porch. I get a lot of stuff done on my front porch, but it's just a screen porch. And so like last Thursday, I just put on like my huge like toboggan hat with the ear flaps and like two scarves and like my jacket, and I just did my work out on the porch because I needed a break. Um, if you're interested in like the architecture of that, my friend just got published in the Wall Street Journal. I told you guys about that, right? Um, David Duane, Dewane. Uh, and you may, I believe you have a Wall Street Journal subscription through Dunwoody Libraries, but he has been interested in this for a long time, and he actually has like this sequential office space that like all of the workers move through these individual spaces over the course of a day, or you can go through it once and then do it again. Some workers might choose to do it 4 times in a day, but it's like basically like a kitchen island where they socialize and just like hang out. And then there's like this more like research and like open your horizons sort of zone. And then there's the like deep work zone, which is like a closet. And then he actually has you step outside and then back inside, and then there's showers. So if you really want to like talk about a threshold, like when you go through this threshold, you should shower. Totally change your day. There's parts of the area where no shoes are allowed, for instance. So this is entirely about psychology and the psychology of like getting the most work done for yourself.